Buongiorno. Buongiorno a tutti, sono molto felice di introdurre oggi Luciano Tovoli e vorrei anche ringraziarvi per la partecipazione. Questo è l'ultimo incontro nel nostro programma sul Restauro e ok. Sì. E Luciano Tovoli, che voi sicuramente conoscete, è uno dei più importanti direttori della fotografia.
Director of photography of Italy all over the world. He collaborated with many movies.
Fanno parte della storia del cinema.
Of part and parcel of the history of cinema. And he worked with Dario Argento, Ettore Scola, just to mention a few, Antonioni. Before giving the floor to Tovoli, I would like to tell you a few words on the restorations that were presented here. C'eravamo tante amate, Dramma della Gelosia, two restorations that were made in our laboratory in collaboration with Luciano for the color correction. He will tell us something about Una giornata particolare, another movies by Scola, on which we work together. And for all the films, the restoration was starting from the original negative. The three movies had different features and so different challenges in terms of restoration. In particular, C'eravamo tanto amati. I would like to introduce this topic. In the original negative, there were frames enclosed, replacing some frames with frames that were torn and with problems, so they were not considered to be used in a reprint made in the year 2000 and were replaced by frames on film recording, the first digital work by the early 2000s. So in the original negative, we found these shots, these frames, that, besides being bad quality vis-à-vis the original negative, it also had digital artifacts. So in order to solve the problem in the technology of 20 years ago, there were actions that with the software of the time was not very successful. So this is a problem we find the original negative we worked on, and in my opinion I felt the need to say something, because in the case of these movies often we find that some sections that were extracted from the original negative, and we can start from there. Otherwise, it is very important to search for the other available elements to find some elements that in restoration you cannot keep these frames with digital artifacts coming from the film recording of those years. To you the floor. The issue, the topic of restoration, and we are going to talk about that, seen from the point of view of cinematography. I'm a director of photography, DP. So this topic did not exist for a long time. I worked in cinema for the first 30 years. We never thought about reviewing the film you made or to see after 10 years what had happened to the film. So the idea of restoration was not there in terms of maintaining a historical, a social work. So even a bad movie is a document, so you have to preserve it. Even a film that was shot in reconstructed elements on the set is a document of the time it was made. And for financial reason, economic reason, we thought that maybe color, for example, specifically for color movies, so we know there was a black and white cinema that is less worn down in terms of the passing of time, and also besides the mechanic, when you break perforation, when you pull this film, but black and white can last for hundreds of years. Martin Scorsese, at the release of Gattopardo by Luciano Tovoli and photographed by Giuseppe Rotunno, my dear friend, discovered in a New York screening the Gattopardo was totally pink, was the Pink Panther, instead of being because the color, the positive color in the tend to have a magenta became magenta after 10 years, turned magenta. So there was a big battage. I was the president of the Italian Association of DPs at the time, and he called me and asked me to help him in publicize the issue. Let's go back and see the old movies and see what happened to them. And we were interested then to understand whether one of my movies called The Passenger by Antonioni could have the same quality, high quality, thanks to the director, or whether it had turned magenta. And we saw that many movies suffered from that problem. So there was an appeal made for Kodak, inviting them to take that into consideration and trying to find positive, because the negative lasted longer. Instead, the positive print deteriorated. So Kodak, a few years, issued a positive, which was guaranteed 50 years, but then the warranty was 100 years. And at the same time, with the onset of digital cinema and the illusion of digital cinema as a way to maintain and keep the quality of the films, we thought it was eternal. We were very ignorant at the time. Instead, we realized that the stock is the best place to keep the film. Otherwise, on the digital, you have to renew all the files every 5 years. Instead, if you maintain the negative and positive, you can keep it for 100 years. So the stock, after being left aside on the original, now the stock is still used. In the before last Oscar movie, of 5 nominated films, 2 were shot on the stock. The stock has not been discarded. There are authors who are very interesting and have power over production, deciding to shoot a film on stock. And this is a way of keeping up, and this will be preserved more easily. The restoration is not changing a movie, because in recent years we made many mistakes. A mistake by us, the DP or cinematographer. These restorations are made without the director. So it seems that the director suffered so much, because being a director is a terrible job. If you want to suffer in your life, well, become a movie director. If you want to lead a more acceptable life, you can decide to be a cinematographer. But you are moved by the suffering of these directors. I met many directors, many of them who are part of the history of cinema, that on the first day, on the set, they say, I don't want to shoot anything. They were so tired, so to convince a producer, to find the money, to convince actors, explain the movie hundreds of times, and convince the last cameraman and operator, this is the most beautiful film of life. So they don't want to proceed anymore, and you have to be close to them and convince them and pick them up. So having won and bypassed this problem, so there was this illusion or delusion, let us say. Well, Michelangelo Antonioni I was working with him in those times. He thought that with stock we had many limits in creation. When you develop the stock before the restoration, afterwards, 10 years later, we had very few choices. We can develop with a darker or lighter, hotter or colder range of choices. In the development, and we had to do it during the shooting and not post-production. The word we hear on the set, no, there's a problem. Well, we solve it on post-production. I don't think it would be an advantage for the film. What does it has to do with the restoration? It has to do with the onset of digital, that we thought about in 1979 with Antonioni, when nobody thought that the stock would be abandoned, discarded. Antonioni, we were a sort of Don Quixote and Sancho Panza. So we, a great director, a visionary, trying to attempt on the against the windmills, when he had this idea of shooting a film electronically, because the digital world did not exist. So the digital universe did not exist. So we found the word electronic, and that was an experimental movie trying to understand whether with the electronics, with the means that TV at the time used, the camera that were as big as this table, with a very low quality of the tape on which you recorded, could provide for the future some creative ambition or authorial ambition, and form director who have an image as a narrative element. Because, and I digress, some directors are saying, well, my film are so spoken with such a good writing and script that you don't need images. You can do it for the radio, but then they don't give to the photography, the camera, the lighting, and photography of these images a great importance. So there are directors instead, and Antonioni perhaps in the history of cinema, but also Kubrick, to mention another great protagonist of the history of cinema, give the image an enormous importance, not as a decoration, but as, and I digress again because I don't want to talk about a technician in order to prepare a shot. As I found myself in my mind, I think I've learned how to do it, and then I have to face the restoration of a movie I did not make. And so there are some interesting problems being raised. So filmmakers such as Kubrick or Antonioni providing a great importance, a drama on the image. Not Antonioni was not. For example, Becky Sharp was made the first color film besides the Disney films 35, 36, Mammalian. Becky Sharp was made by saying, so colors are splotches of color. Everyone became very creative. Color was born right away with the birth of cinema, not in 35. Applied by hand, because of course of French, well, cinema is a French creation, but then also the British, the Americans, the first were able to advertise their invention, the French. So the films were colored. Pathé colored its movies at the end of the 19th century. They were hand colored, great laboratory with technicians, women that applied the color on the frame after frame. So the color existed since the birth of cinema. Somewhat the color was missing, and then it was applied after the revolution of sound in 1927, the revolution of color in the US with Disney and with Mamoulian, the director of Becky Sharp, that apply conscientiously this technique to make it a narrative element. That's why restoration is important, as analysis of color of the film and the changes of color through times, and trying to re-establish the original color. Consider the color is a narrative element. It is not always so. There are many films that are colored. I can mention of my 90 long features, at least 60 were simply colored, because they put a color stock, they put the image in the camera, and we shot the reality as it is, which is colored. But the fact whether you have color or not is not important on the plot. Usually they're not the most beautiful one. They are the least interesting, because nobody asked themselves the question. The story was important, so the film was shot, and the film had his life. Sometimes it was a success, other times no, doesn't matter. So, but the color was just a means to an end, and you cannot correct it because there was no time, the means, the director's will to do so. The director coming very tired, exhausted at the start of the writing of his cinema novel becomes very exhausting. There are young directors now, they are full of energy and they want to go. But when an author tries to put their visions on producers whose aim is money, making money, considering the cost of movies. So this need of have a return on investment pushes producers to push directors to find simple solutions. Antonioni, I worked 10 years with him. We made 3 movies in 10 years and prepared 6 of them, but for 3, the producer ran away after 3 days because they understood that perhaps we would go over budget. Professione reporter, when the timing, we had a schedule for the film, we worked for 5 months, 2 overboard. Then the producer made 10 times the money, but at the beginning he was desperate. So he did not pay us in the last month, although the success, the crew never got the money they owned, but the film was screened all over the world. So this is the forward. We have all these efforts shared by the director and everyone, and the first collaborator when you start shooting, because the cinematographer is the assistant director. In complex movies where the assistant director organizes camera movement, the extras, and holds the set together, but do not have any creative functions. They never talked about directing issues. They talk about practical issues. This day we have to end the shot, etc. as programmed. That's the assistant director. The director instead opens up with the cinematographer. And so at the restoration time, if you work on that movie, then the director gives it in the hands of the cinematographer. Go and see if there are deteriorations and try to do something good. Remember what we did on the set with Antonioni when we worked on the set. So these indications were simple. The framing was his work. He chose all the frames. We were very rich because he took many liberties. 2 frames a day. In Hollywood are 50s a day. 50 framing a day because you have the coverage. Not only what you need to do, but you do all other shots, frames. Perhaps the editor would need a close-up, and we have to do it before he asks for it. So we work for hours. So Antonio did not say anything about lighting. I was a bit surprised. I had made some good movies, and I was young at the time. So this movie with Jack Nicholson, that was not a great star that he would become later. He was a rising star, but he was already coming from Hollywood with the mythology, the myth of Hollywood, this Mecca of cinema. And everything was shot in Munich, in Spain, in real life. I did not, but I expected he said, Luciano, what are you doing? I don't like it. It doesn't happen often, but whether been so maybe one tries, so nobody says anything. But everyone, I felt free to do what I wanted with the lighting and photography. So I'm making a movies now in Rome. I apologize. So I find a good excuse to come here. Maybe someone will call me and stop me. I hope that would be nice call, not an emergency. So this following an agreement, I said that a documentary on Baroque in Italy by Americans, that today I would have to come to Bologna. And so please, a very important thing, do not disturb me. Americans are quite strange, although they are very capitalist in their approach. If they take you for a film, your life disappears and you have to be at disposal. I convinced them today is very important, as I convinced once Anthony Hopkins in an American production with Julian Taymor, an extraordinary director. The film was called Titus, with Anthony Hopkins, and I promised that I organize a small festival on cinematographers on Palm Springs. I said, I won't make the film if those 2 days in May I cannot go to Palm Springs, and I just schedule. I would lose only 1 day. With 3 days I could come and go and stay for the opening of this festival that I organized. And they, at the beginning, yes, there's no problem, of course you can go, as they did with this project. And when 15 days, I start to say, be careful, because the date is coming. Next Saturday, I cannot work. No, it's impossible. A cinematographer cannot leave the set. And then this time you'll see it. So try to convince Anthony Hopkins. So I knock on the caravan, 15 meters of caravan. So one was not enough, he had 2 for his friends, etc. And he said, Luciano, come in, what happens? I'm sorry, but in 10 days I have to leave. Oh, you have to leave. Oh, that's nice. I've never seen that, a cinematographer leaving. No, I'm not going. If film interests me, I'm going on a Saturday, come back Monday, and then we'll take over another day. Well, in Rome, Saturday you don't work, but we were just outside Rome and said, oh, finally I can visit Rome. Go, right away. So I was very happy. Producers were going crazy. No, he said, yes. He told me that I can go. And today there's the same condition. If the film costs 30 million euro, this one costs 2 million, so the damage is much lower. Going back to the restoration. This is a very long digression as an introduction, but because I'm here, I wouldn't be here if I had not taken a subway 15 days ago. I was living near Cinecittà and being very active in my association to establish an international federation of cinematographers in 1992 called imago.org, a federation of associations of cinematographers from Europe at first, 27, 29, and now there are 53 associations of cinematographers from all over the world. This globalization of association enabled us to make agreements with the European Association of Restorers. Here you don't need it because Bologna is the focus, the center of restoration. So this is a seminal element of cinema culture, and we have to be very grateful to people who started doing that. And the team, many women work in this sector, and I'm very glad about that. So they focus on the need of restoration and the quality of restoration. The need, because because you don't need agreement to call cinematographers to collaborate with the colorist here in Bologna to make a good restoration. You don't need an agreement. There is an agreement, but so they, everything that was restored had always a cinematographer taking part in it. Today, this is possible for Dramma della Gelosia, the central movie, and we have to talk about. We made it online. I could not leave my work, but I set up this besides TVs. I have a display, a monitor that was made by a laboratory in Rome, so the monitor with the same quality of the monitors for the cinematographer I work with, who's now in Paris to work with a French colleague, Gian Domenico. I forgot Gian Domenico Zepp. I forgot his name, who was very precious on the work. We are going to talk about. So I wouldn't be here if I had not taken 15 years ago the underground, something that I used to live close to Cinecittà Studios, and I used to go there, where we have the Italian Cinematographer Association's headquarters. I bought the newspaper. I didn't want to walk. I've always been a bit lazy. And I take the subway, I buy the newspaper, I sat, and there was nobody, towards Cinecittà, one stop from my house and the studios. And someone was reading the newspaper, really with the head into the newspaper. I opened the newspaper and tried to look at it, and I said someone beating on the newspaper. And the man looked at me, and it was Ettore Scola sitting next to me. Everything was empty, and by chance, I sat next to Ettore Scola. We've never met each other. Well, I knew who he was. He knew something about me. And he told me, hey, where are you going? I'm going to, you're going. We go to Cinecittà. Yes, we go. But listen, are you free? Do you want to work a movie with me? And I said, Maestro, 10 movies, not one, because I knew that with Scola everything worked. I knew him. And I knew how he behaved on the set, and he corresponded to my ideal. And so these extraordinary things happened. We went to the office, to his production office. We signed the contract for one movie, and we made a first movie, an episode movie, just to get to understand each other. On Piazza Navona. And then we continued. We made 7 movies together. So we kept the promise of 10 movies. Then he betrayed me, deciding to leave us before his time. And then there is a sort of a wedding with another director, a 15-year wedding. We have an agreement with 12 movies. Barbet Schroeder, we made 7. Barbet Schroeder is also French and US. He made several films. The Mystery von Bülow, the first movie I worked with him, and many others, 6 of them, all in Hollywood, mega films. So there's another matter in terms of restoration as well. So I finally get to the movies by Scola. I've worked with Scola in a long time, although in the time where Scola had already expressed his great quality of great cinema narrator. And thanks to that, he gave me the power when the restoration, to restore the film, so these old ones, the one I did not participate in, he asked me to participate in these restorations, and I was very happy because at Immagine Ritrovata they would be very happy for my participation, and we worked on the mechanically and technological more complex movie by Scola, C'eravamo tanto amati, a film where there's everything, color, black and white, then artifacts introduced a bit brutally and crudely, and also the use, at a given point, the actors had to appear younger. Now we have filters, mechanism, technology in the Da Vinci. This Da Vinci is everywhere. If you go, get your tonsil taken out, there is a Da Vinci machine. In every space, there is that Da Vinci. That's the same group working on automated machine in many fields. The Da Vinci was brought to glory by these people that choose to call Da Vinci in their system. So then they put Dior stockings, the assistant body's Dior assistant, and they were glued behind the lens to disseminate the image. That is to say, you eliminate the wrinkles. When you step back 10 years in a movie, the simplest thing at the time, we didn't have any other tool to have a filter that would make the image more supple, softer. The actors are the only one that complain. But men would like, the actors would like to blame you, but they don't want to admit that their face has more wrinkle. Mastroianni is the exception. He was an actor that he told the cinematographer, not me, in that case, for Japanese advertisement commercial. So Magnani said the same thing. Anna Magnati, it took 30 years, and I counted all the lines, the wrinkles, but you're taking 50% of my lines. It's not myself. I'm not myself. Magnani told a cinematographer that asked the electricians, put these flags, a flag, a light, so you put a sort of a piece of metal, black metal, to stop the light, take away the light on my eyes. But also, she had really, these dark signs under her eyes. They say, take away that flag. So these, signs under my eyes made my success. So then there was this problem of making them younger, and we used these Dior stockings because the stocking does not have an impact only on the close-up, also on the background. So everything looks dreamlike. It was used that images that were realistic, and you put a double stocking, one in front and one in the back of the lens. So attempting to destroy the quality of the lens. Now Zeiss in London, where they build the Cook lenses, the best in the world, in my opinion, they study ears to everything could be etched and precise, and we come and put a Dior stocking in front, as putting a wall before a very refined lens. And then you can see the results on the screen, not always positive. So the restoration work of C'eravamo tanto amanti was passionate because so you had to pay attention and to keep up that and not to solve the problems. So in this very problematic film, let's take the negative. Starting from the negative, we step back. We reduce the stocking, and we make it less evident. Ettore Scola was the first. Do not touch anything. He was in Rome, and I called him all the time, and he said, don't touch anything. The film must be like we shot. So the film made his story, had his story in agreement with Fellini. Scola thought that once the film is finished, is out, closed, we care for it, and now it has to start to walk on their own legs. Verity is, oh, this is, oh, I think the shot are finished, no more. Only Woody Allen for years had this privilege of remake a third of the movie. At the end of the movie, he recalled the crew, the cinematographer of Carlo Di Palma of Dramma della Gelosia. He was called back to New York for 2 other months of shooting to throw away what it was done because an actor, didn't like that. So it's I agree with the Italian maestro saying that the film has been completed. Fellini didn't even go to the screening. So during the shooting, he shot in Cinecittà, interiors, and the laboratory was 50 meters from the studio, the set, number 50. He had an apartment there, so he got into Cinecittà with the script and did not leave Cinecittà for 6 months. So he was happy. He walked around. He never go to see the materials, the rushes. Peppino Rotunno, the cinematographer, was his closest friend during the shooting. He didn't want to know whether it's good or bad. I don't care. You have to tell me if, from a technical point of view, the material is visible, can be screened. I don't care. So, but no stress, because usually he was very visible and he was also very screenable. So it's a way of working that was really good, and so to eliminate stress and provide the movie with all the potentials. At the time of the shooting, both these directors, they said before leaving us, they said that the movie should comply with also the chance that happens in movies. It's hard for a director to say so, but I'm a secret agent. A director will never admit that something happened by chance. Something very brilliant was brought on the set by an actor that revolutionized that day because it changed the lines in a completely different way, much richer, or took from these lines the richness, or that a cinematographer had an idea without anybody saying anything. So but depending on where you were, maybe I do on counter shot. So all the actors are just shadows or black silhouette. Then also you take guts to put that forward to actors. Once the director decided that the actor can be a black silhouette, they cannot ask for a lighting. So this kind of situation makes it so that on the screen you find another movie. My friends directors told me that it's never 90% the movie you wanted to do. Fortunately so, because the movie is 20, 30 people. Now we can make a movie with 3, 4 people. I recently worked with a young 19 years old director. I think there's the new genius of Italian cinema. And we made a short, 3 people on the set. So I come from a cinema of minimum in years, perhaps, you can't believe it, but in 1960, after leaving school, I made a film, Bandita d'Orgosolo, on shepherds, Sardinian shepherds, with a plot built through time. There were 3 of us, and we stayed 6 months. So we had the biggest gift, time, which usually we don't have. But the crew are such a mix of people. Of course, someone would come up with good ideas that sums adds up to other. Also, operators, cameramen had good ideas on the speed of a shot, of a paneling shot. So forget the zooms, because zooms are terrible. So it's a way of getting close to the actor by being away. Instead, actors should feel that the camera is there, co-protagonist. I see machinist moving, changing the speed of the paneling cart, and then the directors first they curse them, but then instead they said, well, I'll pay you dinner because I've changed my rhythm and you changed the movement of the trolley. And so the dolly man making this film, all this movement. So changing during the shooting, perhaps there is an imperfection. And this is the case of Una giornata particolare, considering Scola. That was an extremely difficult restoration for the choice of color. The Pasqualino De Santis, who was the first Italian to receive an Oscar, but for another movie by Zeffirelli's first film. He was in the history of film, he was the first cinematographer that won the Oscar at his first movie, something that was marvelous. So it takes 50 years to win an Oscar, sometimes you never receive it. So and he found himself like that. So he found a gift of a cinematographer that was his teacher, Gianni Di Venanzio, who had worked with Antonioni, that came before me and Carlo De Palma. In many years, specifically for black and white films, he worked with Fellini, but he was not a color cinematographer. He did not understand color. So, and with Gianni Di Venanzio, and then he died, and so he was on the movie and the set, and he looked with the technicians, and he won the Oscar. Of course, so the Oscar is pressure, but also it doesn't matter here. So, Una giornata particolare, now we get to the core of our presentation. So with my colorist, it was a very difficult project. We had to fish back out the costume, the jumper that Mastroianni had, to understand the original color, because the Italian cinema, but not only the Italian cinema, it has this great strength, not now, but before, in costume making. We have costumists that are fantastic, all Oscar winners. So there are the warehouses where you find all the clothes. They used to take the dresses or made by Mastroianni, so they put them in storage.
So they are still there physically. So at a given time, a discussion, friendly discussion, cropped up with Direttore Scola on color. In the restoration phase, we couldn't obtain the right color they had adopted, because of course they had bleached the film, and there was this slightly hot color. So we went back to this environment. We had to go to the costume makers. Please show us the original color, and then we can understand how much should we desaturate to reach what Scola and Pasqualino De Santis did at the time. It was a very interesting task. But in leaving defects, this film, if you remember, starts with a very nice shooting of a facade of a real Rome building, but it was rebuilt in the studios. They could have, of course, shot this live, but they didn't. Ettore Scola wanted to have a frame at the fourth story of this building. Would have been difficult, of course, to build up all the scaffolding to go up to that floor in the fourth floor, but then having this sequence plan and then going to the window, follow Sophia Loren was waking up all her family, a lot of people there. So it was difficult to do that live. The camera should have stopped at the wall in front of the window. We could not destroy that wall. So they decided to rebuild that part of the facade, the bigger one that you can see at the beginning, at Cinecittà on the first floor to repeat and resume the lights that were there. So this is something that was increasingly lost. And now we have to always shoot live. We don't use studio shootings very much any longer. So of course we come from the neorealism, Italian cinema. Why am I saying this? Because there is a neorealism, but then we have Visconti, the theater, Antonioni that used to shoot always live, but he wanted to modify reality. That was the problem. Antonioni wanted to paint a forest or a road, but you can't have the right media to paint reality. That's why we resorted to electronics, because electronics allowed us to even change reality. So films tend to have more harmony in terms of colors, but in editing we cannot overcome all the objective difficulties. So with this dolly, even though it was done in the studio, there was a moment where the camera comes on very, very slowly, goes over the window, and then I imagine how they did it. They took the lower part of the window and put it on a sort of dolly. So once the underlying wall could not be seen, this wooden wall was taken out, and the dolly could go on with dolly with 6 wheels that could be driven in every direction. So there was a sort of jump. When I noticed this later. I didn't know Ettore Scola yet. I was just a viewer, an innocent viewer. I didn't see this sort of jump. But when we studied the film, the first thing we saw was this little jump. Should we maintain this defect while now we can solve this defect? We can make 2, 3 frame, 24 frame stable, and that's it. So what Ettore Scola did with Pasqualino De Santis is a very easy task now. Ettore Scola cautioned his crew and said, Luciano, stop. You are going along a path that does not work. You have to leave the film as it is. You have to rebuild the pros and cons of the film. Mastroianni's color is okay. We found it. We solved that. Is jumper, but also the other color problems on the Loren face. You solve them. That's good, but you cannot change the film. You shouldn't do that. Was on very easy terms with them, and they said, I'm sorry, before doing this, that's why I'm calling you. You are not here, you are in Rome, I'm here, and I'm with very nice friends. I'm very happy to be here. I'm asking you, otherwise I would have asked you on the set. Shall we do another one? So why didn't you do something else as you were aware of this defect? So this cameraman saw this or heard this little jump. He didn't say stop. So the frame went on, and the shot was wonderful, was imaginative. If you look at how Loren played with the camera and vice versa, with stopped moments where she was speaking. So I saw some artists, they were really worried. There was a little negligible fault or defect, but they wanted to do exactly the same. But then you can't possibly doing the same thing. A second good shot, you say we are at the 14th shot, finally we have a good one. We are the 15th one. We're not at the 16th one, but at the 35th one. So we have to go on another couple of hours to obtain this. And the actors are very tired. The cameraman is very tired. So I said, Luciano, we stop there because the cameraman performance was good. So the chief video cameraman and performances, Lauren's performances, the kids' performances, they were great. It was a miracle of 1 week's work. I don't really care if the camera has this very, very little jump. The history of filmmaking accepted a much worse thing in extraordinary films. So this was really a good lesson we all learned. We didn't need that because sometimes when you want to do things very well, you might be in a dangerous position. If you want to tell Scola something, that there is a little jump in a frame in one of his most famous films, this means that you are an innocent person. I like being an innocent person. I had the privilege of being awarded a prize, if you like, by Ettore Scola, who told me I had been very good. So it was really a prize to me. So we were having a walk. Sometimes we needed to break out a bit, and we had a walk. And he told me, Luciano, I'm very, very happy. And I was thinking of the quality of my work. Okay, I'm happy with what I'm doing, and that's good. Because you have to know, Luciano, that since I've started working with you, I've slept well every single night. I said, I didn't know I had this sort of healing properties. And, you know, I have insomnia. I can't sleep very well. So I was very pleased to learn this. So these were the sort of difficulties we had to tackle and also the lessons we learned. And Una giornata particolare is a classical example. Finding the right intonations, for example. Lauren was a colorful person. She was passionate. At the beginning, she was subdued, if you like. She had the role of a subdued woman. Her eyes were not sparkling kind. She had depression. But then she had this impossible love story with this unknown character that then is revealed. And this is a process that's going on. Maybe viewers are not aware of this. That is making her visage more lively, more colorful. These are all very tiny things and make a restoration good, and a type of restoration that is full of awareness. I'm, of course, talking on behalf of my colleagues that abide by the same principles. We've been discussing these principles for long in our associations. There is an international debate on this. We say we have to be present, but we don't want to be invasive. Very often the director leaves us alone due to the fact that the director doesn't want to see his film again, in a way. Very often directors do not take part in restoration work, and I think we are lucky.
Noi insomma ce ne lamentiamo un po' direttamente, anche lo diciamo, insomma.
Sometimes we complain, and some colleagues of ours, on several occasions, had a different attitude. There was a really amazing type of restoration work. I worked on a lot of films, very popular ones to less popular ones. I worked on a film, Suspiria, did that, and there are still funds. I can go to South Africa and discuss agreements with the French colleagues in South Africa. There is a great wine growing area. It appears you are in Switzerland. And a cameraman was ill, and he sent us his cousin. And this cousin of him came, he saw the first chart, he saw my name, cinematographer's name, close to the director, and very discreetly came to us and said, "But are you a relative of Luciano Tovoli?" I should have said, "Yes, he's my cousin." But I was also a bit, proud of this, and I said, "It's me." "Oh, Luciano Tovoli," and he started being very happy about this. So I stayed there for 10 days. First of all, I was in Johannesburg University, and then at Cape Town for another 10 days, this Suspiria. And I was one of the foolish guys in the world that like this huge range of extreme colors. So it was a sort of revenge I took, as against some people who said, that green, I don't like it. And I've never understood up to now, how come the European Federation of Colorists, you can't talk about green. But I said, why? Because I didn't see anything, and is it okay? Yes, it is. I like it. It is okay. And that's a kind of green. And then the type of red color, what do you think about that? So I think that green was very good, especially because it was a very nice film stock. I have always used Kodak. I've never used the Fujifilm material. Every single color has its own particular life. You just have to decide on how to use it creatively. Antonioni, during his Deserto Rosso, found a very nice frame that I restored, not with my friends from Bologna this time. I was in Rome working on that. A wonderful frame, and I saw that the actress was very depressed and very strange. But here I saw a petrochemical industry, and the chimneys, you could see that in the film. Poisons were coming out of the chimneys, but the colors were wonderful. They were not real. Colors that could not have been created, just to make you understand how dangerous colors are, especially when they are particularly beautiful. You see those fumes and say, that's beautiful, you could put them into a painting or a film, and that's why Antonioni chose them, because based on his own color drama art that he took from Eisenstein, they were useful. And Eisenstein wrote a treatise on this and said, you have to talk about colors. Even when you're doing the scenography or the script writing, you have to decide the color you're going to use, and then this is going to be used in restoration work, even though no mention was made of restoration at that time. Viti came, she was lost, and then she came out of the shot. So while Carlo was preparing the color, Antonioni saw that there was wood very close with a beautiful, very lively, bright type of green, and I was not there. And these are, stories that Antonioni told me later. So he had put the character in front of this industry, and this meant that poisons were threatening the world, and the actress could not tackle the poisons that were harassing her. The sort of psychoanalytic story being told. So the cinema was then being narrated, and images told us much more than words do. And that's true, this might be true. So he said, no, we can't do that frame. I think I have to stop. I conclude. I'll end with this. So he said, okay, and we can paint the plants using a gray color. So I could not go back during the night. There was far away thunder, rained a lot, and Antonioni, wearing his pajamas probably, went there with an umbrella. He was crying. And he told me, I saw nature prevailing, and that wonderful green came back. And there I was fully convinced the green color might be dangerous. Let me make a last point on the film. I should have talked about this. I'm very sorry. I love speaking. The problem was given by faces in the Dramma della Gelosia. Mason had to be, of course, very tanned. He had short sleeves, and the difference was made in between the tanned and not tanned part of his body. Then we had Monica Vitti. She's red-haired. She had to be pale. And this paleness was very accurate for the drama of jealousy that was starting on. So these different tones and shades were obtained without using sort of masks. You can have a little circle on the visage of the actress on the same frame, one on Mastroianni's face. We tried to reduce this type of effects to the minimum, minimize them, and we tried to be loyal and faithful to the author's willingness, Ettore Scola and Carlo Di Palma, his collaborator. I talked extensively about him because I met him and worked with him for a long time. I hope I was not too boring to you. Thank you. So we'll meet again next year.